Okay, so we're up to questions 2E4 and 2E5 in the second edition of Statistical Rethinking. Before we look at the questions, I just need to remind you that all of these easy questions in this chapter rely on this code here. And what this code does is it simulates the globe tossing example that's talked about in the chapter and also in previous videos in this playlist. The idea, again, is that we have a globe and we're tossing it around among a bunch of people. And every time somebody catches it, their index finger lands on either land or water, and we tally that, and we're going to use that to figure out how much of the globe is covered in water. And so what this code does is it generates a posterior distribution for every value in p-grid, and what p-grid is the proportion of the globe that is covered in water. So in other words, we get a posterior distribution that assigns a probability to every possible value of which the globe could be covered in water, and that value is encoded in p-grid. And then we sample from that posterior distribution. I talked about that in the video just prior to this, so look at that if you need a little bit of clarification. But we sample from that, and then we're going to talk, or we're going to ask questions about this posterior distribution by messing with these samples. Okay. So having said that, question 2E4 and 2E5 ask, it says 20% of the posterior probability lies below which value of P, again, where P is the proportion of the globe that is covered in water, and 20% of the posterior probability lies above which value of P. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is point out that this is the inverse question of what was being asked in in 3E1 through 3E3. So here is the questions for 3E1 and 3E3. They all take this form. How much of the posterior probability lies below P equals this, P equals that, okay? And here we're asking 20% of the posterior probability lies above or below which value of P. So in other words, the first questions, E1 through E3, we are given a value of P, right? So we're given 0.2 or 0.8, okay? And we're asked for how much of the posterior probability lies above or below that value. Here we're given the opposite information. We're given, the amount of the posterior probability above the value of P, and now we're being asked what value of P is this, okay? So the thing that we are being asked for here is called a quantile, and the command is very simple. It is just quantile, okay, and it's of what data are we asking the quantile for, and then what quantile are we asking for, okay? And what quantile is going to do is it's going to give us the value of samples, and again, samples will give us all these different values of P. It will give us from p-grid, it will give us the value of P below which 20% of the samples lie, and then similarly for which 80% of the samples lie. Okay, so if we run this, we get values of 0.51 and 0.75. So to interpret this, it is saying that 20% of our samples lie below the value 0.51, 0.52. And 80% lie below the value of 0.756 or so. So before closing this video, I just want to make clear what a quantile is in the context of this question. So, okay, so let's build a little probability distribution here. Okay. Okay, so here's our probability distribution. It's not very good. Okay, and down here are our values of P. In other words, proportion of water. Okay, and so here we have 0, here we have 1, roughly 0.5, and we can fill in the rest. Okay. Now we don't actually know what our probability distribution looks like. Or, I mean, we kind of know from previous problems, but it will look something like, probably the maximum is going to be here. It's going to look something like this. Okay. So in questions 3E1 through 3E3, we are being asked, so we're given a value of P, the proportion of water, and let's say that it's 0.2, so let's say about here, and it asks, well, how much of the probability distribution is below that? And so it's asking for all of this here. And then another one of the questions is, well, how much lies above 0.8? Okay, and so that's roughly here. And so the answers to those questions, 3E1, 3E2, are asking about these values here. Okay. The third one asks for the 3E3 asks for how much is represented between those, and that would be this whole still black area. Okay, but 3E4 and 3E5 are asking the inverse. It says I know that 20% or 80%, but 3E5 asks, okay, I know that 80% of the probability mass lies above a value. So it gives us this orange value. And it asks us, what value of P is that? And so it's asking us for this right here, right? And similarly, I don't remember what the 3E4 was, but 3E4 asks, okay, I know, it says, I'm giving you that I know where 20% of the value is of the probability mass. What is the value on the x-axis, the proportion of water that applies to?